Don't come to New Year's Eve, my brother texted. My fiancée, Megan, is a partner at Davis & Polk. She can't know about your situation. He was uninviting me because he thought I was a failure. He had no idea that the situation he was ashamed of was actually a shell company called Axiom Holdings and I was the CEO. He also didn't know that Axiom was about to acquire the biggest client Megan had ever represented. I stared at the message. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at the closing documents on my desk and changed the plan. I wasn't going to send a lawyer to close this deal anymore. I was going myself. Before I tell you what happened when Megan walked into my boardroom 48 hours later, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? I want to see how far this story travels. The next morning, my coffee was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. It wasn't a neighbor or a friend. It was a courier holding a thick, cream-colored envelope with the Davis & Polk seal embossed on the flap. I signed for it, feeling the weight of the paper stock. It felt expensive. It felt like a threat. I opened it right there in my kitchen, standing barefoot on the cold tile. It was a formal cease and desist letter, signed by Megan herself. I read the first paragraph, and the air left my lungs. It didn't just ask me to stay away. It accused me of systematic harassment and attempted extortion regarding Samuel's past financial struggles. It painted a picture of me as an unstable, jealous sister trying to sabotage her brother's happiness because I was mentally unwell. The letter demanded I cease all contact with Samuel immediately, or face legal action. I pulled out my phone to call Samuel, to ask him how he could let her write this filth. But the call went straight to voicemail. He had blocked me. He was hiding behind his fiancée's billable hours. My name is Rihanna. I am 29 years old. I built a venture capital fund called Axiom Dynamics from nothing into a market force that swallows companies like Megan's clients for breakfast. But reading that letter, I didn't feel like a CEO. I felt like the small, powerless girl they had always needed me to be. The urge to fight back was visceral. I wanted to drive to their apartment, kick down the door, and scream the truth until they choked on it. I wanted to show them my bank accounts, my portfolio, my power. I wanted to make noise, but I didn't. I walked to the window and forced my breathing to slow down. In my line of work, I learned a long time ago that noise is for amateurs. Silence is for closers. This is what I call the silence trap. In any high-stakes negotiation, the person who speaks first loses leverage. If I reacted now, if I called them screaming, or hired a lawyer to send a rebuttal, I would be playing their game. I would be validating their narrative that I was emotional and unstable. I would be giving them a warning that I was a threat. But if I stayed silent, if I let that letter sit unanswered, Megan would interpret my silence as submission. She would think she had scared me off. She would think I was weak, broke, and terrified of her big, bad law firm. And when a person like Megan feels safe, they get sloppy. They get arrogant. They start putting things in writing that they shouldn't. This letter wasn't a defeat. It was a receipt. It was tangible, notarized proof that the lead counsel for the sellers held a personal, malicious bias against the principal of the buying firm. She had just handed me the weapon I would use to execute her career. I walked over to my filing cabinet and placed the letter inside a folder marked Acquisition Closing. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't send a text. I simply let the silence settle over the apartment, heavy and cold. They wanted me to disappear? Fine. I would be a ghost. And on January 2nd, I would be the ghost that haunted them in the one place they couldn't escape, the boardroom. The word extortion burned on the cream-colored page. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so tragic. Megan thought I was trying to squeeze money out of her successful fiancé. She didn't know that the only reason Samuel wasn't wearing an orange jumpsuit right now was because I had drained my entire life savings to keep him out of one. I closed my eyes and the memory hit me like a physical blow. It was 3 years ago. 2 a.m. My phone rang, cutting through the silence of my tiny studio apartment. It was Samuel. He wasn't the polished, arrogant man who blocked my number yesterday. He was sobbing. He was hyperventilating. He was calling from a holding cell at the county precinct. He had gotten involved with an illegal sports betting ring, and he was in deep $125,000 deep. And the people he owed weren't sending letters. They were sending threats. He was facing felony charges for embezzlement because he'd tried to move money from his previous employer to cover his tracks. I didn't hesitate. I didn't lecture him. I walked into my bank the next morning and liquidated everything. My retirement fund. My emergency savings. The seed money I had been scraping together for my first startup. I wired $125,000 to a lawyer and a settlement fund to make the charges go away. For the next 2 years, I worked 2 jobs coding during the day and bartending at night just to pay my rent. I ate instant noodles. I walked to work because I couldn't afford the subway. I did it because he was my brother, and he promised me, with tears in his eyes, that he would pay back every cent. "I owe you my life, Rihanna," he had said. I opened my eyes and looked around my office. The view from the 50th floor of the Axiom building was breathtaking. The city looked like a circuit board of lights below me. I wasn't that desperate girl anymore. I was the founder of a fund with $2.5 billion in assets under management. I didn't need Samuel's money. I could buy and sell his entire existence before lunch. But that wasn't the point. The point was that he had never paid me back. Not a dime. And when he met Megan, the pedigree lawyer with the shiny reputation, he realized that having a sister who knew about his gambling addiction and his massive debt was a liability. He couldn't play the part of the successful, self-made partner if I was there to remind him of the truth. So he decided to rewrite history. He wasn't just ghosting me. He was erasing the debt by erasing the creditor. He thought that if he painted me as a crazy stalker, Megan would use her legal power to bury me, and his secret would stay buried with me. It was a cold, calculated move. It was financial fraud dressed up as family drama. He thought I was still the sister who would sacrifice everything to save him. He forgot that the girl who bailed him out had grown up. He forgot that I kept receipts. I swiveled my chair back to the desk. The cease and desist letter lay next to the acquisition file. Samuel wanted to pretend the past didn't exist. He wanted a clean slate for his wedding. Fine. I would give him a clean slate. But first, I was going to remind him that in the world of high finance, you can't just delete your debts, you have to pay them. And the interest rate on betrayal was about to be astronomical. I picked up the desk phone and dialed extension 402. James, my general counsel, answered on the first ring. He knew we were in the middle of a delicate acquisition. But he didn't know the opposing counsel was the woman currently trying to sue me for existing. James, I said, my voice flat and businesslike. I need a rider added to the closing documents for the TechFlow acquisition. Specifically, to the representations and warranties section for legal counsel. James paused. We're 48 hours from closing, Rihanna. The papers are already drafted. Unless it's critical, I wouldn't recommend opening the file again. It is critical, I said. Add a clause stating that lead counsel warrants, under penalty of perjury and immediate termination of the deal, that no immediate family member has outstanding insolvency debts exceeding $100,000 to the buyer or the buyer's principal beneficiary. There was a silence on the line as James processed the request. It was an unusual clause, specific, aggressive, and highly irregular for a standard tech buyout. That's very specific, he said slowly. Is there an exposure risk I should know about? Just covering our bases, I said. Send it over. Tell them it's a non-negotiable compliance requirement for our offshore investors. They want it signed by close of business today. I hung up and swiveled my chair to face the window. This was the conflict trap. In the corporate world, you don't win by shouting. You win by letting your opponent hang themselves with their own arrogance. Megan was a shark, but she was a shark who was hungry for a commission. This deal was going to make her career. It was a $2.5 billion transaction. The legal fees alone were astronomical. She was closing the biggest deal of her life, right before her wedding. She was high on success and adrenaline, and that made her blind. I knew exactly what would happen when that document hit her inbox. She would scan it. She would see the phrase buyer's principal beneficiary. She would assume, like everyone else, that the beneficiary behind Axiom Holdings was some nameless, faceless billionaire in Zurich or Silicon Valley. She wouldn't bother to dig. She wouldn't pause to run a background check on the shell company's ownership structure because that would take time, and she wanted this deal closed before the New Year's champagne was popped. She would look at the clause, think about Samuel, her perfect, successful fiancé, and laugh. In her mind, Samuel didn't have debts. He was a partner's future husband. He was safe. She was safe. She would see the requirement as a bureaucratic annoyance, a hoop to jump through to get her payout. 2 hours later, my computer chimed. A notification popped up from our secure document server. Document signed. Counsel warranties and representations. I opened the file. There it was. Her digital signature, timestamped at 4:15 p.m. By signing that document, Megan hadn't just closed a deal. She had committed professional suicide. She had legally certified that she had no conflicts, no debts, and no leverageable liabilities with the owner of Axiom Holdings. She had just lied on a federal transaction document because she was too arrogant to check who she was actually doing business with. She thought she was signing a receipt for a paycheck. I looked at the screen, at the loops of her signature, and felt a cold, quiet satisfaction. She had just signed her own execution order. Now, all I had to do was deliver it. January 2nd broke over New York City with a sky the color of bruised iron. A blizzard was rolling in from the north, coating the windows of the 50th floor in sheets of ice. My boardroom, affectionately nicknamed the glass cage by my staff, felt like the inside of a freezer. It was soundproof, transparent, and terrifyingly sterile. I sat at the head of the 40-foot marble table, my high-backed leather chair turned toward the window, watching the snow swirl into the void. At 10 a.m. sharp, the double doors opened. My assistant, David, ushered them in. "Gentlemen, Miss Whitmore, welcome to Axiom Dynamics." I didn't turn around yet. I listened to the sounds of their arrival, the heavy thud of leather portfolios hitting the table, the confident click of heels on the polished concrete floor, the low, murmuring baritones of the senior partners. And then, her voice. It was sharp, clear, and dripping with that specific brand of Ivy League condescension I had come to know so well. "Let's make this quick," Megan said. I could hear the smile in her voice as she addressed her colleagues. "I have a dress fitting at 4. Besides, once we walk them through the liability shield, this Axiom group will realize they don't have the leverage to demand half of these contingencies." "Careful, Megan," one of the senior partners warned, though he sounded amused. "The buyer is paying a 40% premium. They're entitled to be cautious." "There is cautious, and then there is paranoid," Megan scoffed. I heard the rustle of papers as she seemingly tossed the closing binder onto the table. "I mean, look at this principal beneficiary rider they made us sign yesterday. It's amateurish. It screams new money, trying to play with the big dogs. Whoever is behind this shell company is probably some insecure tech bro terrified of his own shadow." She owned the room, confident, articulate, untouchable. In the dark glass of the window, she looked unstoppable. The star associate. Future partner. The woman who had erased my brother's past and silenced his sister. She believed she held a royal flush. "Well," the senior partner said, turning toward my chair. "Let's meet the Wizard of Oz." "Miss?" I rested my hand on the armrest. "Chin. Rihanna Chin." I turned the chair. The silence was absolute. Megan froze mid-gesture, marker clenched in white knuckles. Recognition hit her in stages, confusion, denial, then pure horror as the truth snapped into place. The shell company. The clause. The debt. "Hello, Megan," I said calmly. "Please sit. Weren't you just explaining why my due diligence was amateurish?" She tried to speak. Nothing came out. "I don't know who she is," Megan stammered, grasping for control. "This is some kind of setup." I slid 2 documents across the table. "Exhibit A," I said. "Your cease and desist letter identifying me by name as Samuel's sister. Exhibit B. Your warranty, certifying no family debts over $100,000 to Axiom's principal beneficiary." I leaned forward. "That's me. And your fiancé owes me $125,000. She screamed denial. I played Samuel's voicemail, his tearful confession, his plea. The room went cold. Lawrence looked at her. "Get out. You're fired." Security stepped in. Megan snapped. She lunged, shoved me, then panicking smashed a glass pitcher and cut her own arm. "She attacked me," she screamed. I pointed to the blinking red camera light. "This room records everything." The fight drained out of her instantly. She was led away in handcuffs, assault, false reporting, fraud. Minutes later, Samuel called, begging. "Goodbye," I said, and blocked him. Then I signed the debt assignment. I didn't want the money. I wanted consequences. I sold the debt to a recovery firm that would never forget him. At the window, New York lay silent under snow. In the glass, I no longer saw the girl they dismissed. I saw the woman who built an empire from betrayal. I didn't lose a family. I removed a parasite. I turned back to my desk. I had a company to run.